Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us at the AcuCongress Federal Fly-In Advocacy Training Session 2. We're going to go over the basics tonight. This is going to be, for a lot of people, very rudimentary concepts, but they are important. And you'd be surprised at the number of people who haven't heard of some of these concepts. So we're just going to talk about the fundamentals. We've got definitions and descriptions, and I do want to say that there are no trade secrets here. I think that anyone who has been in this field for long enough recognizes that the advocacy issues have been presenting themselves for long periods of time in both the states and federally. This is not the first time that acupuncture legislation has been introduced. And we'll be using a lot of those same concepts and techniques moving forward. We want to start with definitions tonight. And for the record, guys, I don't tend to read PowerPoints. I speak off the cuff. And one of the reasons that I do this is because I know what I'm doing. And also I learned to publicly speak giving congressional testimony. And so I was taught never to read anything that bores people, and to always make sure that I knew everything that I was about to convey backwards and forwards, enough so that if somebody asked me a question that was on the fly and not something that I had prepared for, I could definitely answer those questions. So we want to start out with some basic definitions tonight. You want to look at the congressional staff definitions. Congressional staff is so important to get to know. I know that people think that they have missed opportunities when they don't end up meeting with their legislator, but the truth is you want to meet with congressional staff because they are the gatekeepers to those legislators. They make some determinations about what actually reaches their bosses. And so it becomes important to know who you're dealing with. There is the chief of staff. You're likely not going to talk to them very often, but we do have meetings with chiefs of staff. There is the legislative director. You will be talking to a lot of legislative directors. There was a time when all of those LDs or legislative aides, LAs, they really had their own lane that they would stay in. You will primarily be meeting with a health legislative aide or a healthcare legislative aide. So we use those acronyms all the time. Between HLA and LD, you're going to see that quite a bit. Now with staffing issues, the truth is your legislative director is often going to cover a variety of things. Where you used to have a staff of nearly 30 for various topics, now you see 4 or 5. Sometimes down to 2, depending on what kind of skeleton staff they're running on these days. You're not often going to be meeting with the press secretary. You will be dealing with people's schedulers. And then, of course, the legislative aide or legislative assistant that I had just spoken about. Those are going to be your primary points of contact. There's a couple of things inside of the glossary of terms that I definitely want people to be familiar with. One, a bill. We gave a quiz a couple of weeks ago, and we asked what the difference between a bill and an act was. And surprisingly, about 60% said that there was a difference. There's not. This bill is HR 4803, and it is an act of Congress. It is the Acupuncture for Seniors Act 2021. So there is no difference. We will use them interchangeably. An act isn't an act simply because it gets passed. That's a law. So we're going to be seeking co-sponsors. And so we want you to understand that there's a process to this. We really want bipartisan support, so we can't upload one party over another too terribly quickly. And we have some surprises for you next week when we get into a deep dive with the district. I have hearing outlined. Typically, that would be the thing that we are seeking as well. And I'm not saying we're not. I want it very, very clear that for the most part, what we're going to be dealing with is trying to add enough co-sponsors to show the interest in this particular bill so that we can hope for it to be stripped out and used in a Medicare expansion package later on. All right. While we're here, I want to talk just for a minute about the importance of team dynamics really quickly. This is a grassroots campaign, not a grassroots campaign. And so as we are learning and growing together, I want people to get accustomed to the fact that we're going to be asking you to interact with each other, and we'll touch more on team dynamics later. So the 5 C's of advocacy. We have connections, cause, communications, count, and content. And we're going to go over all of those right now. Connection. Who am I? Who are you? And who are we to each other? So we're going to be asking you to connect, like I said earlier, dealing with team dynamics. But this grassroots campaign, all of our campaigns are about connection. Look at yourself in relationship to your legislator. What do you have in common? What can you get help from them with? We want you reaching out in your district. We want you to get to know the office. We want you reaching out to each other to make sure that you have support as well. And who am I? Well, I'm a constituent. You are constituents to this office. And so you have every right to be there, no matter what your credentials are, no matter who may think that they're more important than others. The truth is, you're a team that is trying to make a connection with this office so that they too become a champion of your cause. Who are you? Well, that would be the congressional staff member. It becomes important that we know exactly who you're talking to. And in this digital age, you can find out anything about anybody. So we're going to be talking about the importance of research shortly. And so we want to make sure that people know that, yes, you can find out anything about your legislator, but you can also take the time to dig a little deeper on who you're going to be meeting with and see if there's any way that you can connect while you're in this meeting. And then who are we to each other? Well, this is a dance. This is a relationship. This is in fly-ins, we try and tell people to go ahead and treat this almost like a first date. You really, really want to be in listening mode. You're also presenting, but you want it to be conversational. So I want you really thinking about the relationships that you're going to be engaged in as we move forward.
I can make one more additional comment on that.
Absolutely.
Especially coming from, if this is going to be your first fly-in, or even, something along your fifth or beyond that, it's going to be nerve-wracking, the first meeting that you're going to have. And especially, you have likely never participated in a virtual fly-in, and it is incredibly challenging to actually have that genuine connection whenever you are meeting virtually, when you're talking to a screen, not a person. And so developing this connection early on not only will allow you to have an more easy flow conversation, but it actually takes a lot of the stress off of you, and a lot of those self-doubt conversations that you have throughout. You're like, oh, I don't remember this, one specific part of the bill or the ask. Having that connection really takes the load off. So I would just keep that in mind, that this really is one of the most important parts of this.
Well, before we even go to the next slide, then, Blake, I think it's important that we you and I enjoy this interaction far too much, far more than we probably should. And we do really get a lot of joy out of what we do. It would be lovely if everyone had the same amount of joy in conveying this information to congressional staff members and members of Congress, as they do when they're trying to connect the dots with their patient, when they're trying to do intakes and really get to know the person sitting in front of them. This is a perfect crowd for rapport and for establishing rapport. I don't think this is going to be an easy concept. I mean, a difficult concept for anyone to learn, because you already did this when you were learning to wield your craft. Treat each person that you're going to be sitting in front of. You'll be curious about them, asking them questions, learning to pull the thread when you see that there's some spark that you can jump off of. It's really conversational. And so there's no perfect way to do this except to say this: you want to move them, and that takes connection. And so we are going to be continuing to hammer home. You want to connect with them, you want to connect with each other, and then we want to see how this partnership grows.
And I'm just going to do one more thing, because you remind me that you want to be different, and we are doing this differently than other people. And you want to make sure some of the other people who are advocating on behalf of themselves and their professions are not going to see a person in front of them. They're going to see a tool. And this is that legislative aid is going to be the tool for them to get a bill passed. And so if you want to have their buy-in, this, again, once more, connection is the key.
Mm-hmm. It is, absolutely. All right, research. Just like what we were just saying, know your legislator and their staff. We've given you a resource list here. I'm not going to go through these individually here. These are the things that will be placed into Basecamp, and these are the kinds of things that we're going to be asking for from you, is to do a little research, so that, for me, I don't ever go into any meeting not understanding who my audience is. And I mean backwards and forwards. So I highly encourage people, perhaps it's the equivalent, Blake, I'm not sure, of picturing everyone in their underwear. I don't know. I just feel like when you're armed with as much information and data as you can possibly get, then you actually have an easier time building rapport, because you know something about them. And that's not trickery. It's really engaging them and meeting them where they're at. So there's lots and lots of places for you guys to familiarize yourself with looking particular people up, looking up issues, looking up your legislators and how they vote. And I've given you a resource list for both legislators and for their staffers.
I would say be prepared. And this research is not just who we will tell you are scheduled to meet with, because that is not necessarily who you will meet with. There have been many times that I've been shuffled between staff just because the others are not available. And thank goodness I did that extra research and saw who was the health LA, as well as the legislative director and the member of Congress themselves.
You guys, we'll do a very deep dive next week on district, and there's quite a few things that we're going to cover, but this is sort of an example of what we're going to be looking at. I threw up 2 maps of Florida that we had already done. These are heat maps that have to do with the number on the far left. I hope it's left for you guys. For me, on the far left, the orange map of Florida is going to show you the number of constituents in each congressional district. And so you're going to be armed with that, not just that state map, but you'll also have a breakdown of your district by zip code. So I used Florida as an example for 2 reasons. One, if you notice, there's a gray area, and this is where we actually do not have a legislator. We have almost 100 acupuncturists in the area. So if anybody wants to run for office, you've got an open legislative district, I can connect you with somebody if you are serious about it. We could definitely use members of Congress who are people who have studied acupuncture or integrative health in any way, shape, or form. I keep saying to Blake that ultimately I'm going to make him run for office, because we need somebody. The middle of the screen is going to be the partisan breakdown of the United States. And so, as you can see, we're going to have messaging that is very, very specific. The district is what becomes the most important thing. It is not these red and blue breakdowns. It's just there so you can see it, right? There's a sea of red and some blue, but oftentimes these blue places are highly populated places. And so we really do have a representation in Congress that is reflective of what you're seeing. And then, of course, the state breakdown, also bipartisanship. So we will be providing you guys with all of that information and a whole lot more as we move forward.
The only thing I'll say to that is, even though you see these districts popping up, you are, regardless of your party affiliation, if you even have one, you are a member of that district, a voting member of that district, which Kallie will hit on later. And that's really, again, if we go back to connection, if you can say, I am in your district and this is a cause that means something to me and will benefit your constituents, that's what matters. So, but understanding the lay of the land and very targeted messaging is important.
Right. There is no room for politics and policy work, believe it or not. So there is an understanding that we'll make sure everybody has regarding messaging that is useful when you're dealing with Republican offices and Democrat offices and independent offices. But outside of that, I know there are lots of people who do not share the same politics as the person representing them. However, we still need their help. And so that connection, whether you like their politics or not, in policy, we're still wanting that connection to be made. My cause is your cause. How do you connect with people except to explain to them why your cause is also their cause? And we're going to help you with a lot of that messaging, because at the end of the day, you don't just represent yourself. As a healthcare practitioner, you represent anywhere from dozens to hundreds to maybe thousands of patients. And so your opinion matters, your causes matter. And if you make a strong enough case, there will not be an issue with anybody signing on. How do you find out what their causes are? Go to On the Issues. You are capable of seeing every way that they voted. They've broken it down very nicely to show you thematically how they vote. They'll pull quotes from the legislators so that you can get a feel for what they've spoken about. It's not just about knowing every piece of legislation they ever introduced or co-sponsored or voted on. It actually gives you a hint of their personality. And so it's a really excellent site to go in and try and figure out how each legislator has voted on healthcare issues, but also has made statements on the record for healthcare issues. We want to talk about who your audience will be as well. So even though you've got this opportunity to see how a legislator votes, acts, thinks, speaks, do recognize that even when you do your own research on the staffer, ultimately your audience is that office. They are always going to be representing the office of their boss. And so just know that, again, I think this goes back to whether or not you have a personal feeling about a particular legislator. Just drop that at the door. These people love their bosses, and they work really, really hard to work for them, protect them, and bring things to their attention that are important. All right. So the 7 most important words in grassroots policy campaigns is, Blake?
I am your constituent and I vote.
That's right. I am your constituent and I vote. And that's not a threat. That honestly is just a statement of fact. Unless you don't vote, please don't say that. They have plenty of ways of finding out whether or not you do. So you want to always tell the truth while you're communicating, but you also want them to understand that this is not just about a cause or an issue. This is about this relationship that you have and the role that you play as the governed. That three-legged stool often, that portion of the three-legged stool is often overlooked. We spend a lot of time blaming legislators for doing or not doing what we think they should, and yet incumbents are rarely voted out. So I don't know what's happening there. At the end of the day, we're also talking about what our role is. We must speak up. We must stand for the things that are important to us. When we are talking to our legislators, again, we're communicating with them. You do want to convey that you are a voting constituent, that's how it matters. Because ultimately, yes, they want to do what's best for their constituents and their districts, but they also really appreciate when people are actively involved. And so we're going to show you different ways that we want to do that.
Just one quick comment is that, so what I get to see when I work with people who are, joining in for the first time or first few times meeting with a legislator or their staff, is that they jump into, I'm your constituent and I vote and here's what I want you to do. And so that's not what we're saying. Is we say that's the impact that you have, and your voice matters when you are in these meetings. Knowing that you're a constituent and that you vote and you work in their district and you have that impact on their population, that is what you need to walk into that room with, that confidence of knowing that they need to listen and will have to listen to what you say. And so approach it from a very compassionate and communicative manner in that way.
Compassionate discourse. This is so true, Blake. I'm glad you touched on that, because you're right. Oftentimes people do kind of bulldoze through that statement of I'm your constituent and I vote, almost in a threatening way, in a bullying way. We don't want that. That's just to establish the relationship. You are their constituent. And if you vote, then you're actually more active than lots of people in this country. We've had an apathy problem historically. So my assumption always when I'm placing people in meetings is that they do vote, because otherwise, why would they be here trying to get this done? And at the end of the day, like I said, this is how we begin our relationship, is letting them know that you understand your role as the governed, and that you get that it's a partnership, and it's your job to inform and educate them so that they can make the right decisions. Because the truth is, legislators don't know everything about everything, and they're kind of required to know at least something before they vote on it, you would hope. And so this is your opportunity to establish who you are. You're going to be the educator in this. You are the constituent. They rely on you in order to know what to do. Everybody's heard of the elevator pitch. In this particular arena, you would need to imagine that you are on the same elevator with your legislator as 14 or 15 other people, and it's the fastest elevator you've ever been on. So you have to be impactful in a very quick, particular way. And so this modified elevator speech really is about one sentence. You want to get it down to one sentence if you can. I know Blake and I will talk a little bit about some examples, because we've done this quite a few times, but I want everybody thinking about what your story is. How did you get here? Why is acupuncture important? Not just because you're a provider. What does it look like for the Medicare 65 and up population in your district? What about disability? There are lots and lots of people on Social Security disability insurance, and so they're affected as well. So think about your story and write it down. I know that every practitioner I've ever encountered ever has an amazing story for how they arrived at this medicine. It was never, oh, I was sitting in 8th grade and I learned about acupuncture and then I just couldn't wait to get my bachelor's so then I could go to acupuncture school. That's not what happens. Although I think Blake may have been kind of closer to that than anybody else I know. But at the end of the day, all of us got here by some pretty amazing circumstances. And so you want to write that down. You want to know your own story, know what you're passionate about. And then I want you to distill it into basically a tagline, if you will. Have your sentence ready to go. Let it be the introductory way of how you define yourself in these particular meetings. And if you don't want to do a tagline, if you are rejecting that notion, that's fine too. Work on your elevator speech. But once again, I'm going to go right back to the fact that it's the fastest elevator you've ever been on with 14 other people who all want to talk to the same one person. So whatever you come up with, be it a tagline, a one sentence, or that elevator pitch, we want it to be as impactful as you can possibly make it in a very short space. Blake?
I think that the one other thing is I would say authenticity is key. Kallie hit on it a little bit earlier, is never ever lie in one of these meetings. So be authentic in what you're saying to this person. For those of you who have already developed your elevator speech and you've got it down pat, congratulations. Now get it a little bit better and go and tie your elevator speech into the impact and the connection to the constituency on the population. We were talking about Florida earlier as an example, and we have a bill that is talking about care for our seniors. If there's a state that has an aging population, it's Florida. And so if you want to augment your elevator speech, be thinking about that as well.
Also, for those of you who are going to be bringing patients, this applies to them as well. And actually, it applies even better to patients. Oftentimes, I use my cousin as an example. Dallas has lupus, and it's severely, and the RA is a comorbidity of that, and it had severely mangled her hands. Her one sentence speech was as simple as holding her hands up and saying, "Insurance will not cover my surgery." It was that simple. And she moved people to tears to be standing in front of them. She was advocating for the Arthritis Foundation at the time. And we learned just how impactful those patient testimonials are. So I do encourage people to bring their patients to this and to have them be a part of it and let them tell their stories too, and maybe work with them to distill that message as well so that we can piece together the best possible interaction as we get closer to the fly-in. When I worked for the Acupuncture Society of New York, and during the start of the pandemic, one of the things that we did was roll out the hashtag acupuncture is essential. We were trying to get on the essential services list. In the spirit of that theme, we are continuing this at AcuCongress, but changing it. We will be using the hashtag acupuncturists are essential. And then we'll come up with some others as we move forward when we're introducing our social media campaigns. Blake, do you have any example? I've put you in so many different fly-ins, but can you just fill people in on give them an idea of what your one sentence?
Hi, I'm Blake Langley. I'm a naturopathic physician, and I'm incredibly passionate about access to complementary and alternative healthcare practices. And I hail from an area of the country that does not yet have the capacity to hold us. And I'd like to see that change.
All right. So what Blake just gave you an example of is the modified elevator pitch, which is, more than one sentence, obviously longer than my cousin saying, insurance does not cover this. Somewhere in between, Find your authentic message about who you are, so that we don't get caught up in a lot of superfluous information, and we get straight to the asks and what we want. The count is, it has a multitude of meanings, and it's also incredibly important to me that you guys understand the difference between each one. So time, you want to count your minutes. You have about 15 of them. Depending on how many people are in the Zoom call, you're going to be, this will be a heavily orchestrated series of events before you sit down. And then you have to recognize that nerves kick in and people start to question, you know, if they're getting their credentials out right, and they want to remember all the mechanics of it. 15 minutes, 20 minutes. I mean, Blake, I would say the average, right? We will schedule them for 30 minutes. You're almost guaranteed that that does not happen. Blake, you gave me a number one time. I think you said that. Go ahead and tell them what your typical meetings, the timing on it.
My typical meetings will last probably between 6 and 8, to be quite honest, minutes. I think that the longest I ever had was probably about 14 to 15, and that was with the Senate office.
Right.
But my shortest was less than 3 minutes. It was a hello, here's what I have to say. Do you have any questions? Goodbye. Like, it was very, very quick.
Right.
Still, again, authentic and appropriate, and meeting that staffer where they were, which is important, and which will be included in timing. But yeah, typically you will see 15 minutes is about your cap. You may see a scheduled meeting for 30 minutes, but expect 10 really to be
Right.
closer to the upper limit.
It becomes important because you're going to have somebody who's going to keep that time, and another person who is going to be nudging people in the right direction and kind of guiding that meeting. And then, of course, everybody in there needs to read their room. If you have a legislator that it appears that, or a congressional staff member where you seem to be talking over their heads, and sometimes we do that, especially when we're excited, then you've got to make sure that whoever is paying attention to the timing is also making sure that it's the most interesting timing that we can have. So the other part of the count is going to be to count your successes. We're going to keep little number scales on the wall for the number of days until the fly-in and the number of representatives that we are gaining along the way. Every single success that you have, we want to document, and we want to make sure that that we're kept up to speed on those legislative offices that are much more friendly, and those legislative offices that you're going to feel like maybe you were beating your head up against a wall. So we want to count your successes the entire way. This is not just a one-off. It's not just that one day. This is going to be an ongoing series of events until the end of this congressional session. And we will keep that running tally. I'll put together another heat map as we are picking up co-sponsors along the way. And then the last thing is with regards to the count, it is making every word count. Everything is important that you need to tell them, everything. There is no wasted time here. The effort that you're putting forward is massive. And in order to do that, you've got to have enough finesse about you and about your team to make sure that you are, that everything counts. Everything that you're going to say counts. Blake, do you have anything to add?
I think that you hit the nail on the head, basically saying you are making an early investment already, and just know that this will not culminate into the fly-in and you're going to be done. This is going to be a relationship and an ask and a follow-up that you're going to need to maintain with these offices after you leave that Zoom meeting.
Yeah, I would tell you one of the things for anybody who's ever been with me on the Hill in any of my meetings, I think Blake may have, I'm not sure, but I typically end my meetings by, if they're not going to co-sponsor right away, letting them know that I will be following up every single week until we get to yes. So it's again, not a threat, it's a fact. But this is how we do it. Every interaction counts. Everything is useful. And so you don't want to waste any of your time while you're in there. You have 15 minutes. This is just piggybacking on what we just said. The 15 minutes of focus, this is where the importance of team dynamics comes into play. You're going to have a state captain in every state. And those people are going to be responsible, by the way. I will get more into this and when we start covering the district. But the expectation of the state captains is two things. One, they are capable of meeting with the district leaders so they can assess where they need to meet different needs or challenges. The next thing is the district leaders. Each one of them is going to be responsible. We're hopeful that all of you have some kind of user access to Zoom. We learned in the last fly-in, we were running 20 Zoom calls simultaneously every 15 minutes for 9 hours. And we did all of that with our own technology, which is much harder than we anticipated, especially since it happened during appropriations, which means I scheduled about 300 meetings, and then around 10 a.m. 2 weeks prior, I got about 296 emails from congressional staff, all wanting to change their appointments all at the same time. So it was literally starting over. We managed to make it through that, but what we learned about virtual work is there needs to be a certain amount of control coming from the district leaders. So if you want to be a district leader and you don't have a Zoom account of your own, ultimately we will provide you with one, but we would like to see how much combined technology we can use on this. I alluded to the timekeeper. It is one of the most important jobs that you can possibly have is to keep people on track. And just remember that in this team, each single district is going to have this happening, and you're going to be not scripted, because authenticity is very important. You're going to have carte blanche to submit the things that you want to touch on, but the materials are there. The ask is the same. How you present is going to be up to you, but we want to make sure that this is a team effort. And for those of you who perhaps end up as the only person in a district and you are uncomfortable taking those meetings by yourselves, Blake and I are on hand, and we will be happy to sit in. We can certainly turn to our state captains and other district leaders during that time period as well. No one is going to have to go into this by themselves at all. We will not train you and then leave you hanging there. So again, I encourage you to bring a patient, because at least then you've got a friend. And we encourage you to talk to each other, especially if you like one of your colleagues and you think that it would be really, the word I'm looking for is fun. I recognize that not everybody finds policy work all that fun. I do. I think that this can be really, really rewarding, especially in this industry where we could be standing on the precipice of so many doors opening, especially for patients who have never experienced this before. And I do envision a world in which acupuncture is in every single hospital. It's in rural health clinics. It's in federal agencies where there is so much need for vulnerable populations. I would love to see this medicine spread like wildfire. So if you look at it that way and you recognize that this 15 minutes of focus has to be so impactful and so team oriented, to me, there's no way but to get excited about that. So unless you've ever been on a team where they didn't perform, which I guess is every group project most of us had in college. So it's not like that here. We really do set you up for success. There will never be a situation in which a state captain is pulling more weight than any of the district leaders. There will never be a situation in which there won't be one member of the team that's not utilized. It just doesn't work that way. Content, the key to success. This is about messaging, right? The content of these meetings is a combination of everything that we just talked about. Learning how to communicate, knowing what cause you are representing, but also how that cause ties into the legislative staff member or the legislator directly, the office, the district, the constituency base, all of it. All of these little moving parts that kind of create this little DNA strand to getting this job done. All right, unified messaging. So unified messaging is clear and simple. It's going to be similar, but not completely the same. We already have our 2-pagers that we have put together, but this is the top of it. And what we're going with right now, because we are meeting congressional staff members and members of Congress where they are at in terms of what their knowledge of acupuncture is, we want it, we've explained the bill here at the very top. We've given them a way to access that bill. We've given them the CMS guidelines so that they can see that. But we're working with this. Opioids are covered. Acupuncture is covered. Licensed acupuncturists are not. That message is very, very simple. And it's a simple bill too. It's not a long bill. It's about 4 pages long. The language that we're looking that could be utilized, stripped out and utilized, all very, very simple. Nothing super complicated here. So we have, like I said, our 2-pagers that we'll put together for every single district. Every single one of those is going to have the top of this that I have. That's already going to be there. As we move down the page, you're going to see district specific information. We're going to let them know Medicare statistics in their district. We're going to talk about population issues. We're going to be looking to the census to provide us with information on opioid and substance use disorders as well. We want to point out that pain does not pause no matter what. And so even in this pandemic, we've recognized that people need their providers so much, and yet they didn't really have access to them. Well, as acupuncture, as there is this move to cover acupuncture entirely for the largest purchaser of healthcare in the United States, which is CMS, it becomes important that we hit home on everything that is very, very clear and simple to them. And I know that we have more in our toolkit than just pain and just substance use, but this is where we're starting right now. Blake, do you have anything to offer on that?
The only thing I can say is to help you understand that what we're also trying to do with these 2-pagers is to reduce the research load, not only on yourself, but for the congressional staffers. And so this aspect of the research will be conducted by us for you. And it will be simple. It will be very eye appealing, just so that you can have that on hand. One of the most beautiful things as well for these 1 or 2-pagers, especially whenever you're meeting in person, is that you can slide it across the desk and point and remind yourself of some of those nuanced arguments or statements that you may have forgotten before.
Very good. Very good. So just to be clear, you're all going to have very similar 2-pagers, but they will be, they have some similar information, but they're also going to have a heavy focus on that district. And we will provide you with all of the resources to go, and we want to teach you how to look some of this stuff up to begin with. I'm not putting together 435 district flyers. we're not going to have that 100% matching at this juncture, but hopefully we will soon enough. B, if you don't learn how to do this on your own, then we have to keep training. Well, we don't want to keep training. We want to train people and then have them spread that out and know, turn around and take it back to their state associations or their national organizations or whatever X happens to be, so that they know exactly what information they're looking for, where to find it, and then how to utilize that best as you present it. I'm reiterating what the technology is once again. Basecamp, that little squiggly line at the bottom, that is where we work. That is, and I'm adamant about that. I am still fielding emails. However, the best way to communicate is to reach out to me in Basecamp, to reach out to Blake in Basecamp. You will get notifications for that. If you don't turn them off, please do turn them off. Otherwise, you're going to be completely overwhelmed. I'm going to talk about Zoom a little more in depth this time, but I already did just state we are looking for district leaders and state captains who will have access to their own Zoom accounts, so that if anything goes wrong, if anything has to be rescheduled, while we are still booking the appointments for you, all you have to do is make sure that you're running that Zoom call and that you are capable of rescheduling that as we go about our day. And it is extremely intense. I don't know how to describe anybody who's taken part in a regular fly-in where you're coming there. I mean, you're just there. And so it is a lot of hurry up and wait for a lot of people. And you have the grounds, the Capitol grounds, you can always go sightseeing, you can sit in the cafeteria, you can do whatever. However, when you're dealing with virtual calls, all of a sudden, all of the mechanics from our app all of that went out the window. And we had to overcome technological issues. Blake can tell you this too. At one point at 11 o'clock in the morning, all of Capitol Hill went down with their calls and our calls were down. And it was a precarious 30-minute period in which everyone was starting to freak out. The beauty of that is that we all recovered really easily, that we jumped into high gear and we had those rescheduled and we worked out what we could. And congressional staff and members of Congress were absolutely lovely about it. And they definitely rescheduled. And Blake can also tell you that, they were still following up with us 1 to 2 weeks later to make sure that they were sitting down with their constituents. So Zoom is important. We are looking for people who have some experience with that and are willing to operate those types of calls on the day of the fly-in. And then last, Congress Plus. Congress Plus, we will, again, introduce as we get closer to it. We'll walk you through every bit of the mechanics on that. I don't usually start booking. Typically, most offices don't want you to book until 2 weeks out. There are some offices I can get away with a month out, and trust me, I do. I try. Anything that we book through Congress Plus and any way that we communicate with you through Congress Plus is just going to be a day of easier way of connecting with all of us and connecting with your members of Congress. But like every other app out there, it's just a way of sending form letters and scheduling congressional fly-ins for the most part, or organizing form letters for letter writing campaigns, that kind of stuff. So I don't want people too concerned about this particular piece of technology, because it is really, really user-friendly, and we'll break it down for you in a handbook inside of Basecamp anyway. So for people who are worried about the technology, whether it's Basecamp, Zoom, or Congress Plus, please reach out to me and let me know. Blake is, he's part of this millennial group, and they're quite savvy comparatively to old women like me, but I'm not too bad at it. So we are trying to make sure that everybody feels so comfortable the day that they go into this fly-in that it's really as fun as sitting down with family. Okay, that's a terrible idea. It is as fun as sitting down with a bunch of people that you really like, that you haven't seen in a long time during the pandemic, and connecting with them. That's the goal, is to get you to a place where you are so comfortable with the material, you're so clear on what is good for the district and how it relates to both the member of Congress and their staff members, that this really is just like a conversation and a dance that flows. And I think that because of the technology that we're using, because nobody's really reinventing the wheel here, we're all accustomed to these things. I think this is going to be the best way moving forward. Questions? Not here today, but we will take all of those in Basecamp. We really do appreciate you guys being here. I do want to put a call out to people that I know that there are some people who've reached out to me about what the mechanics of being a district leader or a state captain is. Please email me if you're interested. We will go deep into that particular subject in next week's class, which is about the district. So again, if you have questions, if you're in Basecamp, just ping me. If you don't know what that means, you're probably not in Basecamp. But it's very easy to find me there. I work 16-hour days, so that's where you will find me all the time. You can always feel free to email me as well. However, everything that you do in Basecamp is going to be emailed to me anyway. So I do highly recommend, if you're not already in Basecamp, please join us over there. After next week's meeting, training, we are going to be putting people into their states and then into their districts. It's about to get very granulated, but we wanted to get these sort of broad-based training sessions at least recorded, so we can start doing some deep dives for those who want to move a little further into this field. We've created the AcuCongress. It's a National AcuVist training program. I love that acupuncture just worked so nicely with activist. And so we are putting all of those materials inside of Basecamp. They will be state specific, and they will be in each state and also in each district as these things unfold. So we're literally running hundreds of teams in Basecamp. Please join headquarters. Tell all of your friends that they can be a part of Basecamp, no charge. All of these trainings are free. There is some cost associated with the fly-in, simply because there's a cost that we have to incur in order to be able to pull all of that off. But at the end of the day, we're trying to make this as affordable and inclusive as we possibly can. And we look forward to talking to you inside of Basecamp. Please send me any questions that you have. Let me know if you're interested in becoming a national activist for AcuCongress. And again, encourage building that community. This is not a one-off. These techniques, these are not trade secrets. The key to effective grassroots campaigns is the community that you build.